a lot. When Mr. Gaddafi came in 2009 in Italy for his first official visit, Berlusconi was suffering a terrible pain at the back, and Gaddafi desired to have him or Giorgio Napolitano to go at the airport for the first greetings. And Berlusconi had a terrible pain, and he was trying to avoid also to go there. But we know by WikiLeaks revelations that Gaddafi told to the Italian authorities, if no prime minister or president of the republic are here, I won't go in Rome. And by WikiLeaks reports, we know that Berlusconi took some cortisone and went to the airport. So it's not an easy relationship, but it's obviously the best one that Muammar al-Gaddafi have had with European prime ministers.
And as far as the companies that are involved here, are they, the Italian companies, are they tied to Libyan investment groups, or are some of them tied to the Gaddafi family's personal fortune?
Of international financial crisis in 2008 and the increase of the prices of oil in 2007 and 2006 made a particular effect, that Western countries needed cash flow, and Libya had a lot of it. And so now Libyan companies are stakeholders of some Italian companies, important.
Well, breaking into our programs to bring you this live event in Geneva, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton addressing the media.
Is this on? Yes, okay. I've been holding intensive consultations with friends and allies on developments in Libya, and these have been action-oriented discussions focused on determining the international community's next steps to hold Colonel Gaddafi and his regime accountable for its human rights abuses and violence against its own people, to determine the best way forward after the Security Council resolution to provide humanitarian assistance to those in need, and to support the Libyan people as they pursue a transition to democracy. It has been a remarkable international response where the international community has been speaking with one voice, saying very clearly that Colonel Gaddafi's brutal attacks on his own people are unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Gaddafi has lost the legitimacy to govern, and it is time for him to go without further violence or delay. Saturday's unanimous UN Security Council resolution was a significant beginning. It will impose an arms embargo on Libya, freeze the assets of key human rights violators and other members of the Gaddafi family, and refer the Libyan case to the International Criminal Court. The United States has imposed additional sanctions of our own, and today I discussed with our European allies the specific measures that they will pursue to keep increasing the pressure and further isolating Gaddafi and his regime. As the violence in Libya continues, we are very concerned about the humanitarian situation. So we are working with the United Nations, partner nations, the International Committee of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, and other NGOs to launch an effective, robust response. To start, USAID, our American development agency, has set aside an additional $10 million in emergency assistance to support the efforts of organizations on the ground already to meet the most urgent needs of Libyans and of others who are guest workers or migrants who've been caught up in the violence and dislocation. We are also immediately dispatching two expert humanitarian teams to Libya's borders with Tunisia and Egypt to assist with the displaced people who are fleeing the violence. Our immediate attention is focused on the need to keep medical supplies in the pipelines well stocked and intact. We are also concerned that the ongoing violence may disrupt distribution networks and lead to food shortages. So we have conducted an inventory of all American food aid resources in the region and are prepared to divert or dispatch other food stocks to Libya as the need arises. Now, as we move forward on these fronts, we will continue to explore all possible options for additional actions. As we have said, nothing is off the table so long as the Libyan government continues to threaten and kill Libyan citizens. I want to add that today I also had important discussions on a wide range of other key issues, including the progress of democratic transitions in Tunisia and Egypt. In Tunisia, we welcome the interim leadership's efforts to form an inclusive, broad-based government and its pledge to hold free and open elections within 6 months, but we remain concerned about new violence. We were heartened to hear from Tunisia's State Secretary for Foreign Affairs, whom I had a chance to meet with as well, that Tunisia will welcome the opening of a UN Human Rights Office and open its doors to all UN special rapporteurs. In Egypt, we are heartened also by the efforts that are undertaken in order to meet the commitments that have been made. We hope that the military leaders will reach out to a broad array of opposition voices and representatives from civil society to ensure that the reform process is transparent and inclusive, that it leads to free and fair elections, and that it respects the rights of women and minorities. Egyptians are asking for concrete steps in the run-up to elections, including enacting constitutional reform, releasing political detainees, and lifting the state of emergency. And the United States stands ready to support the Egyptian people in this process as appropriate, including through economic assistance that does help promote jobs and create more opportunities. We also discussed Iran. I conferred with our P5+1 colleagues about our concerns regarding Iran's nuclear ambitions. And at the Human Rights Council, I worked to support Sweden's efforts to pass a resolution establishing a special rapporteur on Iran to investigate and report on Tehran's human rights abuses. The Iranian government should allow freedom of speech and freedom of assembly without fear and should immediately end its organized intimidation campaign. And finally, I took the opportunity to address the Conference on Disarmament on the need to end the dedicated production of fissile material for use in nuclear weapons, and to start negotiations on the Fissile Material Cutoff Treaty without further delay. So there is a lot that we have been working on here in Geneva today, and I'd be happy to take some of your questions.
Our first question is from Viola Ganger of Bloomberg News.
Yeah, here you are.
Madam Secretary, can you hear on this microphone? Wanted to ask you what kind of discussions you had with your counterparts today related to a no-fly zone and the potential for that, and also what sort of next steps in terms of sanctions are you considering, for example, any kind of restrictions on oil and gas imports from Libya, exports from Libya?
Well, as we've said, a no-fly zone is an option we are actively considering. I discussed it today with allies and partners, and we will proceed with this active consideration. When I said in my remarks that all options are on the table, or another way of saying it, no option is off the table, that, of course, includes a no-fly zone. With respect to additional measures, the discussions that I had today focused on how we can keep the pressure on the Gaddafi regime without harming the Libyan people. And we believe there are steps we can take that will do that. We are very aware of the need to block access to resources and assets that the Libyan government, particularly Gaddafi and his family, could get a hold of to continue his reign of violence against the Libyan people. At the same time, we are well aware of the need to keep resources flowing into Libya so that the people themselves can use them to meet their specific needs, to be able to organize themselves. So we explored a number of potential actions, many of which are more in the European theater than actions that we could take. But I think in the coming days you will see the EU take additional steps to try to prevent the Gaddafi regime from having access to resources going forward.
Our next question is from Hadiat Abdelnabi from Al Aram.
Madam Secretary, may I start by thanking President Obama on behalf of the Egyptian people for his stand and your pronouncements today on Libya and Tunisia. My question is that there is a redeployment of naval forces, American U.S. forces, close to the Libyan shores. Is this a sign of an imminent military response?
No. No. First of all, we have, as you know, naval assets in the Mediterranean. We have bases that are NATO bases and that are host country bases that we have used on an ongoing basis over the course of many years. We do believe that there will be the need for support humanitarian intervention. We also know that there will probably, unfortunately, be the need for rescue missions because, as I'm sure you're aware, thousands of Tunisians have already left Tunisia heading for Europe. We expect to see Libyans and others who are trapped in Libya, which presents a great danger on the high seas. But there is not any pending military action involving U.S. naval vessels.
And our final question is from Brad Clapper of Associated Press.
So if you're just joining us, we're listening to the U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton addressing a meeting in Geneva, answering questions. This was after her official formal speech to the UN Human Rights Council a little earlier on. And of course, the issue is Libya. Hillary Clinton there saying that with brutal attacks on his own people, Muammar Gaddafi has lost legitimacy and it is time for him to go without delay. Patty Culhane is listening to the speech in Washington. Patty, this is very much about the US keeping up pressure on Libya, getting a united front, particularly after criticism that the West and the US had been slow to act.
And there has been that criticism. If you keep in mind, the President, Barack Obama, had been 4 days since the beginning of these very violent clashes, and he put out a paper statement, and in it he included Bahrain and Yemen, and basically just the standard call for restraint. It wasn't until 9 days into the protest, so you can imagine what the casualty count was, that we saw the president come out. And he never called for Colonel Gaddafi to step down. That just happened over the weekend. So we have definitely seen an increase in the rhetoric that's coming out of the U.S. administration. And as the Secretary just pointed out, we do understand that they are moving naval assets to the Mediterranean. That's something new. I was checking with my sources at the Pentagon last week, and they said they hadn't heard anything. They had no requests. They weren't even planning for that. So that is something new, that they're moving the naval assets to the Med, because obviously when the U.S. says we are actively considering a no-fly zone, that's a little bit more than just saying we're talking about it.
And Patty, it's interesting that she's taken the opportunity both here in this address to the media and other members, and in her speech to the UN Human Rights Council, to quite strongly criticise Iran.
You know, and it's been a bit interesting. You can definitely tell. I mean, this has been about the most obvious tactic of any administration in recent memory. It was just literally hours after President Mubarak in Egypt decided to leave that we saw the National Security Council representative to the president come out with a statement against Iran. And this was literally a day after the protests